Welcome back to the Foundation in C# course. We're currently in Module 2, and this lesson we're going to learn about more sets, but this time lists. And lists, they're awesome. They're great. So much better than arrays. So let's go ahead and open up Visual Studio and create our new project, which is a console app. Call it Console UI. And this is Module 02, Lesson 08. And again, the first thing we do is that console.readLine at the very end. And we learned about arrays, which is right here. That had a couple limitations. And one of the limitations was that we said, you know what, we can't redeclare it. We have to create a new array and move stuff over if we need to make it bigger or even smaller. Well, there's another option, and that is the list. So let's show you that right now. List, and you use the angle brackets, they're called, and it says T. Now, we're going to cover this in a future module. We're going to cover how to create T and what T is and all the rest. But for now, the only thing you really need to know is T represents a type. So we know what types are: string, int, bool. These are types. So you can put one of those in here. And all it's saying is, what type of data are we going to store? Are they string data? Is it going to be int data, Boolean data? What's the data? So let's start with string. And we give it a name. Let's go first names equals, and you say new. And the cool thing is, once I say new and hit space, it says, oh, you mean new list of string? And the answer is always yes. So you hit tab. So you don't have to type that back out. And then you open and close our parens. Now, what this is initializing a new list. We're going to cover what new equals and why you have the parens. But for now, all you know is you're setting up your list. You're saying, yep, get it started. Notice there's no numbers here. I didn't say with 5 elements. I just said, here, give me a list, a new list of string, and open and close parens. That's it. So it gets it set up. Now, if you're going to do a list of int, it'd be equals new list of int, open and close parens. Now that we have this list, we can say first names dot add. And we add an item. So since it's a string, how about Tim? Now notice nowhere did I give it a number. It just added to the list. And if I copy and paste this a couple times and say Sue and Bob, again, I never gave them numbers. But yet, if I were to say console WriteLine, do our $ syntax, which if, in case you wanted the fancy name for this, it's called string interpolation, which is it's a mouthful. That's why I say $ syntax. But what it means is that we can interpolate or put in certain places, intermix the C# code with our string. So the second element is first names, our square bracket, and say 1. Again, 1 is the second element because 0 is the first. All right, so the second element is, let's say first name at the array position 1. If I run this, the second element is Sue. Well, if we look, whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. If we look, Sue is the second element. Okay, 0, 1 is the position, but then element number 1, element number 2 is the actual, what we would call the second one. So that's really all lists are. If you want to remove something, no problem. You can say first names dot remove, and it's going to remove the first occurrence of a specific object from the list of T. So if I said remove Sue, then I'll find Sue and remove her. Now, if I were to copy and paste this down below, it's going to run this 2 times. The second element is Sue, but the second time I run it, it says the second element is Bob. The reason why is because Bob was the third element, but he moved up to the second element when Sue got eliminated or removed. So you can work with lists using that array type syntax. Now, we're going to see in just a couple lessons how to make this even easier and not have to worry about the array positions. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But for now, just know that with our lists, once you create it, you can add and remove all you want, and there isn't a performance issue like there would be with an array. So we can start off with nothing in the list and add 100 elements. That's fine. And then if we want to remove 50, no problem. It won't have extra ones laying around. We can also still reference them by their element number, so that if I were to copy this line again, let's copy just this line, and come down here. Now remember, it's going to be Bob, but I'm going to say first names at position 1 is going to be equal to first names at position 1 to upper. You know, we've used to lower, which makes it all lowercase. I'm going to turn it into uppercase. So I'm taking the value at that position, I'm converting it to uppercase, and I'm storing it back at that same position. I'm essentially overwriting what's currently there with a new value. Let's just run that to see it. And there you go. The second element is Bob. Okay? So we can still use list like we do an array, but it's so much easier because we could add and remove things. Now, this T right here, the type that we put in place, in this case, string, but we can also use int or bool or anything else. That's what's called strongly typed, meaning I cannot do this. First names.add and put 1 there. It yells at me and says, nope, cannot be converted from int to string. Now, there is a little cheat here. If you say dot to string, technically that converts 1 to a string, which just puts quotes around it. Everything has a dot to string on it, which is sometimes why you use other types as string and they work. Because it says, yeah, okay, I'll behind the scenes call to string and we're good to go. In this case, it won't. It says, no. You got to give me a string. That's all I'm going to take. Because I declared it as string. If I had said bool up here, then all it would accept is booleans. That's it. So list is pretty easy to use. Now that brings us to our pro tip for today, and that is list of T is the most commonly used way to store a set of data. You're going to see list of T everywhere. It's my favorite list. And it's the favorite list of most people because it's just so easy to use. Add things to it, no problem. Remove things, no problem. You can even do things like ordering, sorting, filtering. We'll get to that down the road. But it's a really powerful way of storing data, sets of data, in C#. So get to know list. Make sure you're familiar with how to create it, how to initialize it, how to use it. Now, one thing I didn't show you, but let's do this. If I said I didn't initialize this list, first of all, it yells at me. It says, you can't do that. It says, use of unassigned local variables first name. Because it says, you can't put a value into a first name variable that's not set up yet. We have to do the setup work first. But what if I try to get past this by just, commenting these out? And it looks okay, but then, oh, nope. Use of unassigned local variable first name. It's like, you just can't do this. It keeps yelling at you until you acknowledge you just can't do this. Because you have to set up your list before you use it. You can't just say, no, I'm going to, not set it up. So this is very important. If you have a problem with a list, you probably didn't initialize it. Okay. So let's go back to our pro tip real quick and move on to our homework. The homework is to add students to a class roster until there's no more students. Then print out a count of a students to the console. So this sounds like we're going to be using a do loop or a while loop, some kind of loop. And we're going to keep asking them, are there more students? And if there are, keep adding more students to that list until they say, you know what? Nope, there's no more students. Now, we're going to print out a count of a students to the console. There is a way with your list to get the count. If you want to try and figure that out, cool, go for it. You'll see it in a future lesson. But the way I think that would probably be most beneficial is if you figure out, well, how would I keep track of how many times I've done something? So don't use the count that's built in to a list. Try and do it a different way. Because there's another way of doing it, and it's kind of important to know that way because that'll be useful in a lot of areas going forward. So try and figure that out. Okay? Once you're done this, then move on to the next lesson. But don't move on until you're done this homework.